Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gautama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're studying Chapter 13 of this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is Volume 1 of the book series that is titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. In Chapter 13, I'm sharing with students how to identify your cravings, your desires, your attachments, that mental longing and strong eagerness, so that you can look inward, figure out what these cravings are, and then develop an ability to go in and almost surgically remove these. So I'm going to be helping you to understand how to identify these cravings so that then you can start liberating the mind more and more from that mental longing and strong eagerness. As we go in our class today, you're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. You can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions that you like. As you've been learning, perhaps in this group learning program, some of you have potentially already understood what craving, desire, attachment is. You might have studied the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and other teachings as I've shared those throughout this program. But some of you may not actually have learned these particular teachings with me through our group learning program. So in order to help you learn how to identify your cravings, let me first start with helping you to understand what is a craving, desire, attachment. This will be a refresh for some of you guys, but for others, it might be the first time that you've actually learned this. A craving, desire, attachment, also described as a want, an expectation, a grasping, holding, clinging. This is where the mind has a mental longing for something with a strong eagerness. The mind pulling in the direction of the objects of its affection. It's like the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the unenlightened mind will chase it and chase it and chase it and chase it. And this is what causes discontentedness, all those conditioned feelings. The pleasant feelings of happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, that's being caused by this mental longing and strong eagerness. That if you're chasing after something and you get what you want, you'll get those pleasant feelings. But they're only conditional feelings. They arise, they change, and they fade away. These are impermanent. Because then if the mind doesn't get what it wants, it will end up in these painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, and others. The mind experiences this up and down and up and down. This is the problem in the unenlightened mind, that it keeps experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again. And the cause of that is craving, desire, attachment. You learn this through the Four Noble Truths so that you can learn it, you can reflect on it to independently verify it, and then you can practice to be able to see the truth for yourself that your mind is indeed causing its own discontent feelings. In the unenlightened state, what a mind might end up doing is trying to blame other people. Like, you are making me angry, or you are annoying me, or that is frustrating me. But when you see true reality, you start to understand through the Four Noble Truths, through learning, reflecting, and practicing, that your mind is causing these discontent feelings itself. And the cause of that is craving, desire, attachment. So if you, for example, chase after a certain job, and you chase and chase and chase and chase and chase, and you really want that job really badly. If you get the job, you'll get those conditioned pleasant feelings where you'll experience happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, and euphoria. But then maybe 2 years later, 3 years later, 5 years later, you end up losing the job. Maybe you get laid off. Maybe the company goes out of business. Maybe you get fired. Maybe the company's moving locations and you can't move to that location. And now you can't work at that job anymore that you really, really, absolutely had so much excitement and happiness for when you first got it. Now you might feel sad or frustrated or agitated because the mind based its inner feeling of happiness on the fact of having this job. And now the conditionality of that feeling is that as long as you base your inner feelings on that condition of having this job, that condition is not permanent. So now when that condition changes, the mind ends up in the painful feelings. This is the problem in the unenlightened mind, is that it's basing its inner feelings on some condition. This is called a conditioned feeling. They're pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. And I refer to this as discontentedness, where the mind is discontent. It's not content in the present moment. It's not peaceful. It's not joyful, because it can only be happy if it gets what it wants. So if the mind's chasing, and it gets what it wants, it gets those pleasant feelings. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it ends up in the painful feelings. And all of this is being caused by the craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning. The same thing is occurring if you've been in a relationship with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or wife. When you first got together, you got all these pleasant feelings where the mind was experiencing excitement or happiness or elation. Somebody showing you attention or affection. Maybe you guys are going out to dinner together. You're going to movies. Maybe you're having intimate contact. Maybe you're having great conversations where you're sitting and talking and having all kinds of discussions. And now you're so happy that this person is in your life. And now this is a conditional feeling. Based on the condition of having this relationship, you're now happy. But now as time goes on, when that relationship is over, now you might feel sad or angry or frustrated. The mind is craving for this relationship to be permanent, not understanding that this relationship was always impermanent. And now when you experience the breakup of this relationship, the mind's not getting what it wants. The craving, desire, attachment isn't being fulfilled. So now when that changes, now the feelings change, and that's why the mind ends up in the painful feelings. It's all due to this craving, desire, attachment. So this craving, desire, attachment, it's the problem that's causing discontentedness in the mind. This is why the unenlightened mind is experiencing those discontent feelings. So as long as cravings, desires, attachments are in the mind will continue to experience this discontentedness. The mind will go up and down and up and down. Different times you'll experience some peace here and there, but it's only a matter of time before you become agitated or annoyed. But by the time you get to enlightenment, the mind is permanently peaceful, calm, serene, content with joy. You're no longer experiencing any discontent feelings. The mind is experiencing concentration, focus, clarity of mind, and deep memory. You'll notice your personal, professional relationships are blossoming. You're able to have more harmonious relationships. You'll get to the point where you don't even have a bad mood anymore. All the conditions that are causing the bad mood have been eliminated by the time you get to enlightenment. So you're always in a good mood. One of those conditions is craving, desire, attachment. That's what you need to eliminate from the mind. That's one of the pollutions that the Buddha discovered that needs to be uprooted and eliminated from the mind. The Buddha discovered 10 individual pollutions. These are referred to as the 10 fetters, and it's uprooting those and purifying the mind of those 10 pollutions or taints or defilements that will then produce the enlightened mind, where you'll experience that peace and joy permanently for the rest of this life. So being able to identify your cravings, desires, attachments is so utterly important. This craving, desire, attachment, this is one of the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires. I shared this back in chapter 8 when we talked about transforming the mind away from craving, anger, and ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality. Some people refer to this as greed, hatred, or delusion. Some people refer to it as desire or attachment. This is the cause of the discontent mind. So as you're training the mind to transform it away from craving, desire, attachment, attachment, the generalized training that you implement is breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity. But today I'm going to teach you something in more detail. So if you've learned the Four Noble Truths in the Eightfold Path, where you're learning about implementing breathing mindfulness meditation on a consistent, ongoing basis to train the mind to let go, and you've been training the mind with generosity, where you're giving and sharing, because oftentimes in the unenlightened mind, when there's craving, there's a certain amount of selfishness. The mind's holding on to things. So by training your mind in breathing mindfulness meditation, you're training the mind to let go, to let go, to let go. And the same thing with generosity. When you're practicing generosity, you're training the mind to let go. So these are the generalized trainings that you're going to need to have underway. And what I'm going to be teaching you today is going to be something very specific to be able to help you go in. But if you weren't actually doing breathing mindfulness meditation and practicing generosity, what I'm going to teach you to go in and actually identify and eliminate these cravings, desires, attachments, it's not going to be so effective. So you would like to be sure that you have a consistent, ongoing practice of breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity. Not only is craving, desire, attachment causing these discontent feelings where the mind's going up and down, but it's also the cause of rebirth. Rebirth isn't something that you need to approach very early in your practice, because what's happened in the past is in the past, and what may or may not happen in the future is in the future. Nothing in the teachings of the Buddha is about belief, so you're not going to be interested in believing the cycle of rebirth. There's ways to independently verify it for yourself. But as you learning about craving, desire, attachment, it's important to remember that not only are you eliminating craving, desire, attachment in order to eliminate discontent feelings, but through eliminating craving, desire, attachment, you're eliminating the fuel that's causing rebirth. So if there's craving in the mind at the time of death, there will be rebirth. So just like a fire has logs on it, and these logs are the fuel that sends off sparks, and now the wind carries that spark and it lands and it ignites a new fire. The fuel that's in the mind that's causing rebirth is craving, desire, attachment. That's what's keeping this fire burning. And then it's going to send off these sparks to create a new consciousness in order for an individual to experience rebirth. So by you eliminating craving, desire, attachment, not only are you eliminating discontent feelings, but you're eliminating the fuel that causes this continuous rebirth. The number one goal on the path to enlightenment is to eliminate discontentedness. So therefore, the number one goal is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. The way you do that is through arising wisdom, by not believing the teachings of the Buddha, but learning, reflecting to independently verify and practice. That's where you arise this wisdom of what the problems are in the mind, and then how to apply the antidotes or the remedies to be able to fix that. So if this number one goal is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, to eliminate discontentedness, how could you ever eliminate cravings, desires, attachments if you didn't know how to identify them? So identifying cravings, desires, attachments is what I would consider to be the second most important skill that you could ever develop on the path to enlightenment, next to meditation. The primary training that you're developing is meditation as part of your training on the path to enlightenment, but there's a whole lot of other teachings that you would need besides just meditation. You wouldn't be able to meditate your way to enlightenment, but you also wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without meditation either. So that's a real priority to develop your meditation practice, and that's why I start with that at the very beginning of the group learning program. But now, if you've been practicing meditation for the last 3 or 4 months in the way that I've taught in this group learning program, it's time to add in a new skill or a new ability, something that you need to cultivate and be able to understand so that you can identify what these cravings are. You wouldn't be able to go in and surgically remove them and eliminate them if you didn't know how to actually identify them. So breathing mindfulness meditation is the training to train the mind to let go. When you're focused on the breath and the mind moves off the breath and you're cutting that off, letting it go and bringing the mind back to the breath, what you're developing here is you're developing mindfulness or awareness of mind, where you can be aware of what's going on in the mind. You're also developing concentration, being able to focus on a fixed object. And when the mind moves off the breath, you're training the mind to easily let go so that then you can bring the mind back to the breath. You're gaining some discipline and control of the mind. So that mindfulness or awareness of mind, that concentration and the ability to easily let go is very important on the journey to enlightenment. So when you're in meditation, the mind is almost like a muscle. It's not a muscle, but you can think of it like a muscle, like you would go to the gym and you would exercise this muscle to make it stronger so that you can control the body better with these stronger muscles. Well, the same thing is true about the mind, that when you're meditating in meditation, you're training the mind to get this discipline and control. And as any thoughts are arising in the mind, you're interested in cutting that off and letting it go. Your goal isn't to eliminate your thoughts during the meditation. Your goal is to cultivate this awareness of mind or mindfulness, this concentration, and the ability to easily let go of anything that's coming up in the mind. That's going to help you by practicing that in breathing mindfulness meditation. Now in daily life, when you're out and about and you're noticing the frustration or the guilt or the shame or the stress or anxiety or the boredom or loneliness starting to arise, you can cut that off and let it go. You can focus the mind through that concentration and that awareness of mind or mindfulness. You can observe when the mind's longing, yearning, and pulling towards something. You can train the mind to cut off and let go of these cravings, desires, attachments as you're noticing the mind pulling towards something. In daily life, where you notice wholesome thoughts coming up, no need to cut those off. Those are wholesome thoughts. If you think about taking your mom to dinner or to lunch, or you would like to do something that's wise and wholesome, no need to cut that off in daily life. So in meditation, we're training in one way, where we're cutting off and letting go of any thoughts that arise, because we're exercising the mind. We're training the mind to have this discipline and control. But in daily life, you're using those qualities of mindfulness and concentration to be able to observe any kind of unwise or unwholesome thoughts that are arising, and then be able to cut those off and let them go. You may not be able to internally cut them off and let them go. So as you're making your way towards that goal of being able to internally cut them off and let them go, you may need to be redirecting the mind. So if you're sitting on the sofa, for example, and you're watching the news and you're noticing this frustration starting to arise in the mind, you might need to get up and go for a walk, or you might need to go for a bike ride, or go get some water or something. You would like to redirect the mind in another direction rather than just sit there and dwell in those frustrated, angry thoughts. That's allowing the mind to continue to experience these conditioned feelings. So you would like to cut off any unwholesome or unwise thoughts by redirecting the mind in daily life. But then over time, as you're developing your breathing mindfulness meditation and your practice of generosity, you'll get better and better at internally cutting off. You could sit there watching the news and you could internally cut off the frustration and continue to watch the news, but you may not have the discipline or the control to do this right now. So any aspect of your life where you're noticing these conditioned feelings, either conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant arising, you would like to cut those off and let them go, training the mind to no longer have these conditioned feelings. You're essentially rewiring the mind. You're breaking this apart so you don't allow the mind to get that conditioned feeling and continue to be experiencing those throughout your life. So breathing mindfulness meditation is a very important practice that is going to help you to be able to develop this mindfulness and then apply right effort to cut off and let go of these cravings, desires, attachments as they arise. This is what's going to help you to be able to identify your cravings in the mind, what I'm going to teach you today. So that's why if you weren't practicing breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity, what I'm going to teach you today isn't necessarily going to be so effective for you. But if you need to develop that practice, then work on developing the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity as you now transition into learning what I'm going to share with you today. Because this right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration from the Eightfold Path is that mental discipline that you need. That's what I shared at the very beginning of this group learning program, where I walked you through the Eightfold Path on multiple occasions to be able to help you understand each individual one of those steps. And if you haven't learned that from me, there's no worries, because I have it in books, I have it in videos and podcasts. There's multiple ways that you can learn this. You can get to our YouTube channel, you can go to our website, you can download the books. There's actually audiobooks as well. There's ways for you to learn this, even though I taught it at the beginning of this group learning program, because people join this group learning program at different times, and it just repeats every 7 months. We keep repeating the same program over and over and over so people can continue to learn. So as you're developing this mental discipline, where in meditation you're cutting off anything that arises, but only in daily life you're cutting off the unwise and unwholesome thoughts, this is very similar to what a professional athlete would do. If you were a professional pole vaulter, you might go into the gym and train in one way, but your sport is something completely different. So when you go into the gym, you might do weight training, agility training, cardiovascular training, and that looks very different than when you go out and you do your pole vaulting. So the same thing is true with meditation, is that you're training in one way, and then you're applying those mental qualities in a completely different way when you're actually practicing in day-to-day life. So this is what you're going to be working towards as you now start learning how to identify your cravings and cultivating this non-craving and analysis of the mind. So as you're experiencing discontentedness coming up in the mind, this is the red light on the dashboard of your car alerting you that there's craving, desire, attachment that's in the mind. If you were driving a car down the street and a red light came on the dashboard, you would most likely pull over. And if you had some skills, you might pop open the hood and you might start looking under the hood to try to figure out what might be going on with this car. And in a situation where you don't have the skills or you don't have the ability, you might take your car to a mechanic and ask this person who has more skills to take a look at your car and figure out what's wrong with it, why this service engine soon light keeps coming on. So this discontentedness, the anger, the frustration, the irritation, the annoyance, the guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, the boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, displeasure, even those conditioned pleasant feelings. If you're getting so happy based on a particular thing, or you're getting excited or elated based on some condition, these are all discontent feelings alerting you that, hey, you've got some craving, desire, attachment in the mind. And if you have the skills, you can look inward. You can pull over, you can sit down, you can look in the mind, you can try to discern what are the cravings, desires, attachments that are leading to these discontent feelings. But where you're not sure and you're trying to develop the skill, you might need to take your mind to the mechanic. The mechanic is your Buddhist teacher. You might need to ask questions in a class, make a post on Facebook, in our Facebook group. You might need to send me a personal message or maybe schedule personal guidance where you can talk through the situation that you're experiencing and then share that you don't know what your cravings, desires, attachments are. Or you might say, I think these are what my cravings, desires, attachments are. Is there something else that you're noticing that you could maybe share with me or confirm whether I'm on the right track here? Now, these cravings, desires, attachments, there's a whole spectrum to them. Now, the way we define it as this longing and yearning, this strong eagerness, chasing after the objects of your affection. And that's how we define it so that you can be able to see it very clearly. That when you're in the mall, for example, and you see a brand new pair of shoes or a new phone or a new computer or something else the mind wants, you might notice this pulling, this longing, yearning towards this particular thing. But there's lighter versions of these cravings. Like maybe if you have a craving for chocolate and you don't get that chocolate, your mind might feel kind of annoyed or frustrated, maybe just agitated a bit. Whereas if you get it, you get so happy and so excited, right? So there's this whole spectrum. Maybe if somebody beat up your mom, for example, right? Maybe you have such a deep craving to your mom, you would be so angry and so frustrated. But if you just didn't get that piece of chocolate that you really wanted, you might just be agitated or a little bit annoyed for a period of time. So there's a whole spectrum here. And the more developed your mindfulness is, your awareness of mind, you'll be able to see the strong cravings, desires, attachments, but you'll also be able to see those lighter versions as well that are producing just a little bit of discontentedness. The stronger the discontentedness is, the more deeply held your craving, desires, attachments are. Or there might be multiple cravings, desires, attachments in any one given bout of discontentedness. When you're experiencing discontentedness, if you have a real significant, strong feelings, you either have a really strong, deeply held attachment, or there might be multiple attachments involved in that one situation. Especially early in practice, it's usually not just one attachment or one craving, it's usually multiple things. But then as you practice more and more, you might notice that there's kind of like more insignificant cravings on this spectrum. And now your feelings are more muted. You still are discontent, you're still agitated a bit, but it's not the same thing as over here where you have a real deeply held attachment. So when you're noticing these discontent feelings arising in the mind, this is your opportunity to look inward. You can use that discontentedness as a red light on the dashboard of your car, alerting you that, hey, you've got a problem here. You've got some cravings, desires, attachments here, and you're going to need to look inward and figure out what they are. There's certain wants, there's certain expectations, there's things that your mind's clinging to, and you're going to need to identify these in order to understand them and then put together a plan to be able to eliminate them. So that's what I'm going to share with you now, is helping you to understand this approach that you can take in order to identify these cravings and then put together a plan to be able to almost surgically remove them. But before we go forward, I would like to pause here and see if you guys have any questions on anything that I'm sharing so far, being sure that you understand what cravings, desires, attachments are, what these wants and expectations are, how breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity fits together with all of this. If you have a question, you can put your question into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. I see Biplab has a question here in Zoom. If you'd like to go ahead and ask your question, sir.
Hello, teacher.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hello, Biplab. Yes, I can hear you.
Teachers, thank you for opportunity to talking me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Teacher, I have a question about, family attachment is very strong attachment. It seems to me very strong for me. How can one overcome this attachment with stay within family? Therefore, though it seems to me it is easy to ordination is the better option, but it is unable to for me difficult. But stay within family, how can one overcome this attachment? Though this is very strong. For your kind advice.
Let me get to that next. I would like to talk through the process that one would go through to identify their cravings, and then we can talk about surgically going in and eliminating them. So I'll circle back, Biplab, and I'll cover this one because this is a common one that people have. You don't need to get ordained in order to eliminate your attachments to the people that are in your life, but right now you don't have the wisdom of how to do that. So I'll share that with you next after I explain the teachings of how to identify your cravings and then address them.
Okay, teachers. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Let me see if we have any other questions coming in anywhere across our platforms. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to go forward and share with you guys more content that's going to help you to now identify these cravings and then actually eliminate them almost surgically. So remember the discontentedness, when the mind's shaken up, when it's experiencing those conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant, that's the red light on your dashboard alerting you that something's going on in the mind. This is where, as the discontentedness is arising, you would like to catch it as a bodily sensation. You may or may not be aware of these bodily sensations right now, but there's a bodily sensation that is occurring prior to your mind becoming discontent. It could be like, for example, with anger, you could have tingling in the body rising up towards the face. You can have tightening in the chest, maybe pain around the heart. You might have some tightening in the throat, some heat in the face, maybe some pressure in the skull. This is all indication to you that your mind is about to become angry. It hasn't become a feeling yet. It's just these bodily sensations. And as you develop your mindfulness or awareness of mind, you'll be able to more readily cut off and let go at the bodily sensations. But because your mind's not fully trained and you don't have full discipline of the mind yet, it's going to become a feeling in the mind. There's going to be some feeling that comes into the mind, whether it's a pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, or neither painful nor pleasant. So as that feeling comes into the mind, you can actually cut it off and let it go there. That might be the point where you actually notice it and observe it. So there you can cut it off. If you don't cut it off as a feeling, it's going to be affecting the condition of the mind. It's going to start affecting the condition of the mind for multiple hours or maybe a day or two, or if you've ever been agitated or angry for like a week or so, this is because you didn't catch it as a bodily sensation. You might not even been aware that that was occurring. You didn't catch it as a feeling and cut it off there. So it now affected the condition of the mind for a few hours, a few days, or maybe a week or so. And then it's feeding these mental objects, which are these pollutions of mind, the 10 fetters. So you're interested in purifying the mind of all of this so it's no longer doing this. So wherever you see discontentedness arising, either as a bodily sensation, a feeling, it's affecting the condition of the mind, you would like to cut off and let go. That would be ideal. So whether it's a pleasant feeling, painful feeling, or neither painful nor pleasant, all of these are conditioned feelings. In order for you to get to this unconditioned joy or this unconditioned happiness, you're going to need to let go of this temporary pleasant feelings that are just arising, changing, and fading away, which are ultimately displeasing and unsatisfying because they're only temporary. And by you training your mind to eliminate the conditioned feelings, you can now get to this permanent peace and this permanent joy. So whenever the discontentedness is arising, you cut it off and let it go. It doesn't matter what it's associated with. Just whenever you notice it with your mindfulness, cut it off and let it go. And the earlier you do that as a bodily sensation, the better. And this is the red light. This is showing you that discontentedness is arising, so therefore there's a craving, desire, attachment in the mind. It may be multiple. Now, once the mind calms down from that, you move to the second step, which is reflecting on the cravings, desires, attachments that led to this discontent feeling. You look inward, you become introspective, and try to figure out what are the cravings, desires, attachments that led to this particular arising of discontentedness. And if you can figure that out, great and wonderful. But if you're having challenges at any point, that's where you take your car to the mechanic. You bring your mind to your teacher, whether it's in classes, whether it's in the Facebook group, whether it's sending a private message or scheduling personal guidance. You would like to come and talk to your teacher and say, hey teacher, this is the situation. I can't figure out why my mind is experiencing this discontentedness. Or, hey teacher, this is the situation. I think it's these particular cravings that are causing this. Can you give me some insight and what are your thoughts? Are these the actual cravings or do you see any others? So doing this a few times over your journey with the path to enlightenment, you'll start developing this skill and ability to look inward and be able to identify your own cravings, desires, attachments through reflecting and looking inward. Then after you identify those cravings, you would like to move to the third step, which is now develop a plan to eliminate these specific cravings that are causing the discontentedness, while of course maintaining your consistent practice of breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. I'm going to give you an example of this so you can understand it. Then after you develop that plan and you start going in and actually surgically working to remove a particular craving, then you repeat this process over and over and over again with each individual craving. As you notice discontentedness arising, you cut it off and let it go. Then you reflect and look inward, try to figure out what your cravings, desires, attachments are. Once you identify what they are, then you develop a plan to eliminate a specific craving. So let me share with you some examples from my life of how I've done this, and then you can relate this to specific challenges that you're having. And then we can talk about Biplop's question as well. So at one point, I was leaving my house. This was several years ago, and I noticed that I didn't have my phone with me, my mobile phone. And right away, this fear arose in the mind, that my mind started thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do if I don't have my phone? If I have a problem with the car or have a medical problem, what am I going to do without this phone? And I noticed this fear arose in the mind. Well, the initial thing that the mind wanted to do is it wanted to turn around and go home and go get this phone. I was only 5 or 10 minutes away from the house. I could have easily turned around and went and got the phone. But I recognize this as craving, because if there's any kind of discontentedness that arises in the mind, it's all due to craving, desire, attachment. There's some craving, there's some permanence that the mind's wanting. It's longing, yearning, craving permanence. It's not comfortable with this impermanence, that the phone cannot be with you permanently. So in that situation where I noticed the fear arise and the mind wanted to immediately go get the phone, I decided not to do that, because I identified that yes, the mind is craving to have this phone with me permanently, and this phone is not permanent. So the mind in the unenlightened state, when it's untrained, it thinks the answer is to get that phone, and it thinks that that's going to solve the problem. But it doesn't actually solve the problem, because the problem is the craving, desire, attachment. The problem isn't the phone itself. That's not the actual problem. It's that the mind is longing, yearning for the phone, wanting it to be permanent. So even though I was only planning to be outside for about an hour and a half that day, I actually extended the amount of time that I was outside. I went to the movies, I went to go have some food. I stayed out for about 5 or 6 hours, even though I was only planning to be out for about an hour and a half. So I elongated the amount of time that I was outside in order to put the mind in the situation that it found to be uncomfortable, that it didn't want to be outside without this phone. It wanted the phone to be with it. So when the mind was outside alone for those 5 or 6 hours without the phone, it had to train itself to be peaceful and joyful without the phone. So now as I went home, I waited 2 or 3 days or so, and then I intentionally left the phone at home, and I went outside again without the phone. And there was some agitation that was still there, but it wasn't the fear. It wasn't the same kind of feelings that I had initially the first time. They were less, but there was still some discontentedness there. So once again, I waited 2, 3, 4, 5 days, intentionally left the phone at home and went out again. I kept putting the mind into the situation that it found to be displeasurable. And then eventually I got to the point where I didn't notice any discontentedness at all, that I felt like after having done this several times that the mind had eliminated this craving. But I wasn't sure 100%. So about 2 months later, I accidentally left the house again without the phone. And I reached down and I realized that I didn't have the phone. And I was just like, oh, well, okay, let's just keep going throughout our day. Where in the past, there was this fear that arose. There was this discontentedness that arose in the mind. So I could be sure that the mind had eliminated its craving, desire, attachment for the phone. And then about 6 months after that, I accidentally dropped the phone and the screen shattered. And there was no discontentedness whatsoever when this phone was broken. It was just like, okay, well, that was unfortunate, but let me end up getting another phone. So you can observe the mind with mindfulness, but what you would like to do is when you notice that initial discontentedness arising, like in this example, the fear, don't just turn around and go get the phone. Realize what the real problem is the craving, desire, attachment. Identify what that is, and now put the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in. That plan that I developed was to consistently put the mind in the situation where it was going outside without the phone. And now, over a period of sessions, I was able to train the mind to let that go and liberate the mind from that craving. And this is where the real focus and concentration and clarity of mind comes in. Oftentimes people think that you're getting the concentration through the meditation itself. It's actually not the meditation itself that's producing the focus and the concentration and the clarity, the deep memory. It's not the meditation itself that's producing the peace and the joy in the mind. What's actually producing that is you're eliminating the pollution of craving, desire, attachment. The more you eliminate these pollutions, the mind can become more joyful and more peaceful because it's eliminating this pollution. You'll notice the focus and the concentration, the clarity and the deep memory coming into the mind because there's less and less pollution in the mind. So each one of these attachments or each one of these cravings that you eliminate, you're going to notice improved qualities of mind starting to shine through based on having put together these plans. And remember, you're always continually working with breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. That's the generalized training that you're doing. But anytime discontentedness arises, no matter what, cut it off and let it go. Just cut it off. Cut it off. And if you need to redirect the mind to something else. Then look inward. Start reflecting. Try to identify what your cravings are. If you need help, you can then reach out to your teacher and I will help you. Then you develop a plan to look at these specific cravings, desires, attachments, and try to uncover how you can actually put the mind in the situation where you train it to be able to let go of these cravings, desires, attachments, and ultimately eliminate the discontentedness by eliminating the craving, desire, attachment. And then each time you experience any discontentedness, you do this repeatedly over and over and over again. Some of these cravings, it can take many months to let them go. I'll give you another example that follows this same formula, and helping you to understand how it takes oftentimes many months to eliminate some of these cravings. At one point, I noticed that the mind was attached to coffee. I was drinking maybe 3 cups of coffee a day. It was iced coffee here in Thailand, and I would really enjoy going and getting some iced coffee somewhere. And I noticed that the caffeine was causing the mind to go up into this excited state and then drop off. It was going up and down and up and down. And I needed to eliminate this craving, desire, attachment for the coffee. So I started to put together a plan to distance myself from this coffee. And if you try to go cold turkey on eliminating a craving, desire, attachment, where you just abruptly end a particular craving, the mind doesn't typically like this. The same way of saying the mind craves permanence is to say that the unenlightened mind does not like impermanence. It does not like change. So when you implement change into your life, the mind will typically not like that. It'll kind of revolt against you. So it's better to make little incremental changes, and the mind will tend to assimilate to this and adjust to this more readily. So I decided I was going to go 2 or 3 days without coffee. And I went 2 or 3 days without coffee, and then I had a coffee, right? And then I went like a week or so without a coffee, and then I had a coffee. Then I went maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks without a coffee, and then I had a coffee. And then I went 4 or 6 weeks, and then I had a coffee. And then I even went 8 weeks. And I thought that this attachment was actually gone. I thought it had been eliminated from the mind. And I happened to be walking past this particular coffee shop, and I got the odor in the nose. And now when I smelt that odor, I went right into the coffee shop, and I was standing in line, and I was waiting for my coffee. And I knew that if I drank this coffee, I was going to get headaches. I was going to have maybe dry mouth. The mind was going to get excited, maybe have trouble sleeping. But the craving was so strong, it was really hard to pull myself out of that coffee shop. So I stood there and waited in line, and I was talking to myself the whole time, trying to convince myself that this was an unwise decision. But the craving was so strong, I went ahead and ordered the coffee. I sat down at the table. I started drinking it. I got about 1/3 of the way through the coffee, or half of the way through the coffee, and I decided this is it. I'm never going to have these coffees again, and I threw it away, and I haven't had a coffee since. But you can go that period of time where there's 8 weeks that you haven't acted upon a certain craving, and then the craving can actually arise. So over the course of multiple months, I needed to train my mind to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment to the coffee. And once I did, the mind became more liberated, where there's more peacefulness and more joy in the mind. So this is how you train your mind to slowly distance yourself away from these certain cravings, desires, attachments. And there was a certain period of time where when I noticed a coffee shop coming, if I was walking through the city, I would actually switch to the other side of the street because I wasn't interested in having that aroma come into the nose. And I needed to do that while the mind was sensitive and it was still trying to get rid of these cravings, desires, attachments. But now, the mind being liberated from this craving, I can go into a coffee shop, I can walk past a coffee shop. Sometimes I sit down at a coffee shop because students will invite me to come, and they would ask some questions and need some guidance, and they might be interested to meet at a coffee shop. So I might order a bottle of water or a smoothie or something like this, and the aroma of the coffee, it doesn't excite any kind of craving because the craving's gone. It's been completely eliminated from the mind, so there's no interest in having a cup of coffee whatsoever or any kind of caffeinated drinks. So this is the type of training that you can do to surgically go in and eliminate any particular cravings, desires, attachments. So this is the process that you would like to continue forward with. Let me see if you guys have any questions on this before we go into talking about specific challenges that you guys might be facing. If there's anyone who has any questions on this process or how to develop this plan and how to identify these cravings, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically. Okay, it looks like we have a question coming in here from Amina on Facebook. She says, "Greetings, David. Is it possible to have an attachment to having issues to resolve?" Yes. The mind is an expert at craving, desiring, attached to anything. You can actually be attached to water even, right? So it's not the object that is the issue here. So I give this example to help you guys understand that let's just say you were on your way to go hiking and you had a liter of water in your car and you go out on this hike and now you're 30, 45 minutes into the hike and you realize, oh my goodness, I forgot my water. I got to go get my water. And you hurried up and get back to your car. You might have even twisted your ankle on the way. You sling open the door to the car and you get the water. My water, my water, my water, right? And now you have that water. So this is someone acting with craving, desire, attachment. But there could be another person who's out on the trail 30, 45 minutes into the walk, realizing, I don't have the water that I brought. I'm going to be out here for a while. I should probably go get that water. And now you calmly make your way back to the car. You open the door, you get your water, and you're like, thank goodness I have the water. Now let's go on the hike and enjoy the hike. So in the first example, the individual's mind is longing, yearning, and chasing, wanting this water so badly, right? In the other example, the person just calmly realizes that there's no water and that would be wise to have water if on this 6 or 8 hour hike. So it doesn't matter what the object is, the mind can actually crave and desire anything, even water itself. So yes, the mind can be attached to having certain issues in life and you feel accomplished or you feel satisfied to be able to now address these certain problems in the mind or problems in your life. But let me read on more. Amina has more here. She says, recently the mind has noticed an absence of stress and has been a little strange to not have things to be concerned or problems to solve. That absence of stress is welcome, but also a little disconcerting. Is this common? And is it best to not attach to this moment as well due to impermanence? Yes, as you get more and more liberated and the mind's getting closer and closer to enlightenment, you're not going to have any stress. You're not going to have any problems whatsoever. That life is just going to be smooth. It's going to be effortless. It's going to be so at ease. If you've been practicing like you have, Amina, for many years now, you've been learning with me, your mind's probably becoming quite stress-free and not having anxiety and not having sadness and frustration and all these different problems because you're making wise decisions in the present moment and it's producing wholesome results. Where in the past, you were making unwise decisions that were producing all types of unwholesome results that you had to deal with time and time and time and time again. This is where someone's life can feel like a lot of drama, a lot of heartache, a lot of headache in their life. But by the time your mind's becoming more and more liberated, your life is at ease. Things are very comfortable. Things are very easy, very straightforward. You're just making wise decisions that is producing wholesome results. There's no drama in your life whatsoever. And that's a welcome thing that you can enjoy, but it does feel a bit odd if you're used to having all these different issues in your life that now all of a sudden life just becomes so much easier and so much more straightforward. And as you get adjusted to this more and more, you'll really appreciate it and you'll really value that, wow, all this hard work that you've done to train the mind, things are just going so smooth and effortlessly in your life. And then you can just truly enjoy life and you'll notice this satisfaction and this fulfillment in your life that you're inwardly fulfilled rather than chasing these external things where the mind can only be happy if certain things occur. Now instead, your mind is inwardly fulfilled and inwardly satisfied, and it stays in that mental state by the time you get to enlightenment permanently, where you're just always satisfied, always fulfilled, and you're not experiencing any discontentedness, and life is at ease and very comfortable. Looks like Slav has a question. If you'd like to go ahead, sir.
Hi, teacher Dave. I have questions. You just mentioned couple minutes ago about life become nice, quiet, and smooth, eliminate everything. But at the same time, life is kind of like bumpy road. It's always something happen. You lose job, you lose this stuff, and people die, people go from your life, you break up with loved ones, and so on. So question is, even if kind of like if you have enlightenment and able to eliminate your stress, but life is still have non-permanent good. It's kind of like go up and down.
Yeah, that's not true in the enlightened mind. That's what you experience now in the unenlightened state, where your mind's craving for things to be permanent. So when you lose a job, you're maybe frustrated. Or when a relationship ends, you're maybe sad or agitated. That's because the mind is craving. It has desire, it has attachment, it's craving for things to be permanent. But in the enlightened mind, if a relationship ends or you aren't working at a particular job anymore, you won't be discontent because your mind's not craving and clinging onto this job. You'll understand that, of course, I'm not working at this job anymore because that's impermanence. Or, of course, this person is choosing to no longer be friends because that's impermanence. Or, of course, this person is talking in a disrespectful way because that's impermanence. Not everybody's going to talk to you polite, kind, friendly, respectful. But your mind will be protected, that it won't go up and down and up and down. So even though you're enlightened, you're in the world. You're still experiencing the same things that an individual is experiencing. But you're going to notice that when things are just changing, you're not going to be upset or frustrated or agitated the way you are now. And you're going to be making all these wise decisions that are producing wholesome results. You'll notice that you're not agitated, you're not annoyed, that when these things are changing and you're experiencing impermanence, the mind not having any cravings, desires, attachments, wanting them to be permanent as they're changing, you're not being affected by this whatsoever. You're welcome, sir. Okay, let me just check one more time, see if we have any questions on anything I've shared so far. I don't see anything. So let's go ahead and move into the next part of the class. This is the last thing that I was going to do with you guys, and Biplab is the first one who's kind of asking for this. Is what I usually do in this particular class is I invite you guys to share your thoughts and certain challenges that you're having in life to be able to practice this ability of developing this skill to be able to identify your cravings, desires, attachments, and then put together a plan. So you might decide to volunteer and ask questions here either in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom by either putting it in the comment section or raising your hand in Zoom. You can explain a situation where the mind's experiencing discontentedness, and you can share what you think your cravings, desires, attachments are. And then, what do you think caused these discontent feelings? What were the specific cravings, desires, attachments? And then if you'd like to put together a potential plan and say, hey, this is what I think I should do in order to eliminate these cravings, desires, attachments, you can share that part too. And then I can help you to be able to develop this skill or ability. You might be at the point where you don't know what cravings, desires, attachments that the mind has. Maybe you left home for work, you came back from work and you came to home and you noticed that your mind became frustrated, that you saw all these things in your house that weren't in the normal place. Maybe your life partner put things all over the house and put them in different locations, and now the house doesn't look the same as it did when you left, when you went to work. And now when you came back home, you have all this frustration. You have no idea what your cravings, desires, attachments are. You could share that. Just share the situation and then I will help you. Or you could share, okay, I went to work, I came home, I noticed this frustration in my mind, and I think my cravings, desires, attachments are that I crave for the house to look a certain way. I'm craving for it to permanently look one way. And when I came home and my life partner had her stuff all over the house or his stuff all over the house, I noticed this frustration arising in the mind. So my craving, desire, attachment is I'm craving for the house to permanently look one way. But maybe you don't know how to put your mind into this particular plan or into these situations. You don't know how to develop this plan to put the mind in the situation that's going to now help you to eliminate that craving. And you might be asking me, David, can you help me put together this plan? Or you might go all the way to the plan and you might say, hey, this is the plan that I'm thinking about implementing. How does this sound? Is this something that would actually lead to the elimination of this craving? So you guys can share this. I'm here to help you. If you guys would like to put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can do that. Or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask these questions and then I will help you. So Biplab kind of started this off where he said, hey, how do you eliminate these cravings to a parent or to a brother, or sister, a life partner, or children, any family member that's close to you? This is a common craving, desire, attachment. If you're noticing your mind trying to control people, or you're becoming bitter and harsh and hostile to people, or you're pushing them away, this is what the unenlightened mind typically does. That when you have craving, desire, attachment in your relationships, you will associate those painful feelings that you're experiencing to somebody else or to something else. And now with this wrong view where you're falsely associating these painful feelings that you're having to something external, you will either push that person away or push that situation away. That's called aversion. And it doesn't solve the problem, because when you push people out of your life, you just become agitated or annoyed or frustrated over and over and over again. It's just a matter of time. If the real problem was this person, when you push that person out of your life, you would be peaceful and joyful for the rest of your life. But when you push people away or you push the situation away, it doesn't actually solve the problem. But now the mind can also become bitter and harsh and hostile towards an individual. This is the second thing that will typically happen when there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, and you're falsely attributing your discontentedness to an individual, that you might become bitter and harsh and hostile with that person. Or the third thing you might do is try to put your expectations on this person and control them and try to get them to do things your way. This is the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled. The mind thinks, if I can just get these people to do things my way, then everything will be wonderful. But the problem is that there's 8 billion people in the world and you can't train them all to do things your way. So as long as you're pushing people away, you're becoming bitter and harsh and hostile, or you're putting your expectations on people, the number of people that you can spend time with becomes fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. So getting liberated from your attachments to people is really important, because then you can have more harmonious relationships. You can have fulfilling and satisfying relationships. Where right now, if you're finding it a struggle in relationships with your parents or your siblings, your life partner, your children, your coworkers, your friends, or other people, this is because you have craving, desire, attachment in the mind. And in these relationships, as long as you allow the cravings, desires, attachments to continue, you'll continue to push people away, become bitter and harsh and hostile, or put your expectations on people, and then the number of people you can spend time with becomes fewer and fewer. So by liberating the mind of these cravings, desires, attachments, you'll be able to have more fulfilling relationships. So there's multiple techniques that you can use in order to work towards eliminating craving, desire, attachment to the people who are closest to you. And I've taught classes on this, and I have various courses where you can learn how to develop harmony in your relationships. And if you're looking for that full class, you can go onto our YouTube channel and search for how do I eliminate attachments to the people who are closest to me. The ultimate thing that you can do, in addition to everything else that I teach in that class, is do what's called reflecting on death, or contemplation of death. This is where you sit for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and you reflect and almost convince the mind that this person has died. Maybe it's mom, dad, life partner, children. You do one person at a time. You're not aspiring for them to die. You're not planning for them to die, but you're convincing the mind that they've died. You live this out in the mind. You think about maybe a doctor calling you and informing you that they're dead, maybe a police officer showing up at the door of your house. Whatever it is, you just kind of live that out. And now as you get informed of this death, you might move to the next part, which is maybe planning a funeral or a burial or a cremation or something like this. And you kind of play this out for about 10, 15, 20 minutes where you've convinced the mind that this person has died. You might notice that you're grieving. You might notice that you're sad. You might notice you're sorrowful. You might even be angry and frustrated. And if these feelings are arising, you're actually doing this in the way that you should, because you're triggering that craving in the mind. You're confronting the death of this individual, which is the biggest impermanence that you could experience in the relationship that you might be in. So if you confront this death and you're noticing these discontent feelings arising, that means you're triggering the craving. And now what you would like to do is, after 10, 15, 20 minutes of this session, is finish that and now cut off and get out of that session, and now train the mind to be calm and be peaceful. But then you'd like to do this again and again and again. You might need to wait 2, 3, 4 weeks before you do it again. But after 3, 4, 5, 6 times of doing this with mom, for example, or dad, or your life partner, or children. You can even do this with pets if you have animals and you feel like there's an attachment there. You can do this with your animals. And now, by the time you get to 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions of this, you're going to notice that you're not grieving anymore, that you're not sad, that you understand this impermanence. And you notice that, yes, Mom is impermanent. She's not going to be here permanently. And your mind has accepted this impermanence, and you see the truth of it, and you know that without a shadow of a doubt that mom is impermanent, and your craving to hold on to her permanently has been eliminated. And you can do this over multiple sessions, because mom is going to die. Our grandparents are going to die. Other people around us are going to die. And when death sneaks up on you, it can feel like someone pulled the carpet out from under your feet or chopped you off at the knees. So you can allow death to sneak up on you like this and chop you off at the knees or pull the carpet out from under you. Or you can do what I'm describing here, which the Buddha teaches as contemplation of death or reflection on death, where you confront death on your terms. You approach it when you're ready, right? Like if your mind has this breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation well underway, this is potentially a good time to confront the death of those people who are closest to you. And you can even do this for yourself too. If you have a fear of death, you can put your mind in this situation where you've actually died, and you play this out, convincing the mind that you've died. And when you walk away, as I mentioned, there can be some discontent feelings, but over multiple sessions, you'll see those become less and less and less as the craving is starting to be eliminated from the mind. And when I did this several years ago in my early 20s, I finished up these sessions with my mom and my grandmother, doing this in my mind, and I noticed there were certain things that if they had truly died, that I never said to them, that I would have regretted if they actually had died, and I never said these things to them. And there were certain things that I really wish I would have heard from them, and I never asked them these questions. So I came out of these sessions with a list of things that I needed to talk with them about. So I would just call them up and I would say, Mom, I've always been meaning to tell you this. Or Mom, I've always been meaning to ask you this. And I had those conversations with my mother and my grandmother, and I convinced the mind that they had died. And now all the time that I spent with them from my early 20s and beyond, it felt like bonus time. So any time that I spent with my mom, it just felt like extra bonus time. And you'll notice that with less craving in the mind and having no attachment in the mind, your relationships can really blossom. Because with craving, desire, attachment in the relationships, it sabotages the relationship. You're going to want to crush this relationship. You're going to want to control this relationship and get your loved ones to do things that you're wanting them to do based on your own selfish desires, based in craving, desire, attachment. But when you purge this out of the mind, you can learn to exist in relationships harmoniously and feel very fulfilled and very satisfied. So if you get to the end of these sessions and you're noticing some grief and sadness, this is normal. Just cut that off and let it go, and then repeat this multiple times. And if you're coming out of these sessions realizing there's certain things you need to say or certain things that you need to ask them, call them up and do that. Because if they truly would have died, you wouldn't have been able to do that. And that's one of the whole benefits of doing something like this, that you can reflect on their death, contemplate their death. You're not aspiring for them to die. You're not wishing them to die. You're not even planning for them to die. You're not trying to figure out exactly what you're going to do when they die. You're just trying to confront this death and train the mind to go into this situation that it's trying to avoid. And now, having done that, you've confronted death on your terms, and now you can get comfortable with an individual's death. Because when you experience grief or misery or sadness at the time of death, it's not love that's actually causing that. It's craving, desire, attachment. It's the mind holding on. It's craving permanence. What love is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. So you have an interest in seeing mom be well. You have a goal that mom would be well, or grandmother, or dad, or brothers, or sisters, or others. But if your mind is craving, meaning you're craving for them to be permanent, when they experience death, you'll struggle. You'll have sadness or grief or despair, or other feelings like this coming into the mind. But if you can eliminate that craving and learn how to be in relationships where you can just love them as they are, realizing that you're not going to agree with all their choices and decisions, then you can just love the person while understanding that you disagree with the choices and decisions that they're making. And now in this relationship, when there's no craving, desire, attachment, you're not trying to force them or control them to do anything specific. Now you can exist in these relationships more harmoniously. So this is what you would like to do, Biplab, and anyone else that is struggling with this. This is a very common attachment to people who are closest to you. People do ordain and go away and walk away from their relationships, and that's one way to eliminate a craving, desire, attachment, but that's not what you have to do. You can get to the point where you're in a relationship, but there just isn't any craving, desires, attachments. There isn't this longing, yearning, craving for them to be permanent, and you putting your expectations on these people, wanting them to be a certain way. It looks like Biplab has some follow-up questions or maybe some other questions. If you'd like to go ahead, Biplab, you're welcome to ask those. You'll need to unmute yourself.
It's okay.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, teacher, when I thinking death about my relatives like father, mothers, or wife, this is very dangerous to me. It creates a discontent for mind to me.
Yeah, so you're going to... oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
So you talking about that, reflect on death, our relatives, this helps to, but it is when I thinking it's create fear and in mind that they are dying. So it is difficult to letting them go to stay calm in this situation when thinking they are dying or we losing them.
Yes.
So this situation.
Sorry.
This situation is when I thinking that situation, this hugely creates my mind discontentedness, and this is repeatedly returning my mind that and I am very sorry to thinking about that, and how can I overcome this?
Yeah, you're not going to be able to overcome this without experiencing that sadness, without experiencing that frustration. Death is going to come visit you. Related to your mom or other people, they're most likely going to pass away before you. And you're going to experience this impermanence regardless. You can't control that. So you can either do it on your terms when you're ready to do this, or you can allow death to sneak up on you. And sometimes just talking about this activity of reflecting on death of those close to you, people can get frustrated and angry and irritated just thinking about it, even just talking about the exercise without even actually doing it. And that's because of the craving, desire, attachment. So you're going to experience this attachment being triggered through the impermanence of somebody close to you having died. So you can either let it sneak up on you, or you can do it yourself and confront it on your own terms. So because the mind has craving and it's getting those pleasant feelings, which are conditional, when you start to eliminate that craving, the mind's going to move to these painful feelings. And this is what I describe, that walking to enlightenment is like walking through the fire, but you've got to walk through the fire to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. There's going to be certain cravings that you're holding on to that as you're letting those go, it's quite painful. So for example, when I was letting go of the phone or the coffee, something very simple, it was very painful to let go of that coffee, right? It was very painful because as long as I had the coffee and the mind was able to get the coffee, and I realized that tomorrow I can get a coffee or next week I can get a coffee, the mind was experiencing those pleasant feelings. But when the mind was confronted with this impermanence and it could no longer get the coffee, there was painful feelings in there as I was letting that go. And that's just a coffee. That's not your mom or your dad or your brothers, sisters, life partners, children, pets, and things like this. So you're going to experience this discontentedness. You're either going to do it when they actually die, and then you're going to be left with that, and now you're not going to be able to talk to them or sort out anything that is in the mind, or you can do it on your terms when you're ready to do it, and you can reflect on this and confront it. And that's what I suggest for you, because when you do that, then the whole rest of your relationship, as you eliminate your attachment, you can have peace and joy with your family for the rest of their life. So like when I did this in my early 20s, the whole rest of my life with my mom, which was like another 25 years, we had a great relationship, where prior to that, I had a lot of resentment and hostility in my mind towards my mom. But when I did this, and some other things like loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in daily life, our relationship got to the point where everything was lovely. There was no problems in our relationship whatsoever. So when she actually died in 2017, there was no grief. There was no misery. There was no displeasure. And it's not because I don't love my mom, because love isn't what's causing these discontent feelings. There was love there. There was appreciation. There was gratitude. There was this genuine interest in seeing her be well. But there was this recognition that, yes, of course she's going to die because she's not permanent. And my grandmother is 100 years old. She outlived her daughter. She'll die next. And when she dies, I won't feel any grief whatsoever. But of course, I love my grandmother immensely. We don't have any harsh words between us. We're not irritated or annoyed. Whenever we talk, we have great conversations. And that's because I don't have attachment to her. I'm not forcing her to be a certain way. I'm not putting my expectations on her. I'm not being bitter and hostile and harsh with her ever. I don't push her away. So you can allow death to sneak up on you and you're going to confront this impermanence, or you can do it on your terms. I suggest you take control of it and do it on your terms rather than letting it sneak up on you. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, teacher.
You're welcome. Okay, so let me see if we have any other questions here anywhere. Anybody would like to share? It looks like we have some coming in here on YouTube from Max. Let's see. Max is saying, I was at my local pool hall maybe 3 months ago. An older man came in with a girl that was maybe 18, seemingly on a date. They were in the corner of my eye at first, but when I noticed, I simply left. I saw this man yesterday, and I still have feelings of anger, confusion, mainly because he seems like a regular player at the pool hall. Not entirely sure what the craving is, but it may be that I'm assuming the girl is a captive in this relationship, and I want people to be conscious, happy, and true in their relationships. Just so you are aware, YouTube only allows a certain number of letters per comment, which explains the multiple comments. Thanks. Sure, no worries, Max. So here where you're saying, I want people to be conscious, happy, and true in their relationships. That's the craving, the want, the expectation. You're wanting this thing, right? And now you're wanting everybody around you to be this. That's what you're craving permanence to be. But now there's also some other clinging. You're clinging to your perception. Not only do you have this craving, desire, attachment of something you want, but you have this perception that this younger person is captive in this relationship. What a perception is your views and opinions of the world that may or may not be true. And as long as you cling to your perceptions, now you're clinging to that perception that you're seeing of this younger girl with this older guy, and now it's triggering your craving. Rather than just realize everybody in the world is making their own decisions. And if that woman is choosing to be with this man and that man's choosing to be with this woman, then so be it. That's their choice. And they're experiencing the results of their decisions. So you need to get liberated from this experience of clinging to this perception and craving for everyone to be a certain way in the world. So what I would encourage you to do to be able to address this is the putting the plan into place. Now that you realize that there's this craving of wanting people to be a certain way and this certain perception that you're clinging to, if you're able to, and you see this person in the future, I would go over and smile, say hello, strike up a conversation with them. You know, what's your name? Where are you from? And have a conversation so that now you can relate to this person on a one-on-one basis. Rather than staying afar and maintaining this perception, just talk with the person. And not that you're trying to peer into their life and figure out what they're doing, because you're not going to get liberated to get to peacefulness and joy by going around and figuring out what every single person is doing. But as long as your mind is looking at this person and having this perception, and your mind's clinging to wanting this person to be a certain way, then your mind's going to continue to experience this discontentedness over and over. So you can put your mind in the situation where it's confronting this individual, not in a hostile way, but in your mind you're confronting it, where you just go over and maybe you just smile and you wave to him, and maybe that's all you can do the first time you see him. And then maybe the next time you see him, you kind of smile and wave and say, hi, how are you? And then he says, hi, I'm doing fine. And then you just keep on going throughout your day. And then each time, maybe you increase that a bit more where you're having some conversation with this person. What you're experiencing is what the Buddha calls craving and worry for the world. you're craving and worried about the world. You're holding on to this world. And that's why you're experiencing discontentedness in the situation. And the mind continuing to hold on to the world, you're going to keep being reborn over and over and over again. That's why you're going to keep experiencing discontentedness over and over and over and over again, because you're experiencing the cravings, desires, attachments where the mind's holding on to this world, and you haven't learned the wisdom that you need in this world yet. So it's going to keep experiencing discontentedness over and over and rebirth over and over. So in order to get liberated from this, you're going to need to train your mind to let go of this craving, desire, attachment, realizing that everybody is making their own decisions in life. And whatever they choose to do, they're going to experience the results of that. And your goal isn't to control people or convince people to do anything specific, but to let go of your cravings and get to a point where you have wisdom, and now you're making wise decisions that are producing wholesome results in your life, not being attached to what other people may choose to do or not do. That's how you get liberated from this kind of thing. And remember, you're going to need to keep your breathing mindfulness, meditation, and your generosity continuous and ongoing. So if you don't have that already ongoing, you're going to need to develop that and be sure you're doing that on a regular basis. Okay, it looks like Mayu Lee is sharing something here. She's saying, "Teacher, this is my scenario. Discontentedness, feeling irritated when my kids talk back and don't listen. Root cause, craving. I'm craving for my sons to always listen, wanting things to be permanent. Solutions. When feeling discontent, cut off and focus on the breath or distract the mind. Remind the mind that is normal and that kids will sometimes listen or vice versa, and be okay with it. Slowly train the mind by telling the mind that is also beneficial for the kids. Go through the consequences on their own actions and guide them along the way, knowing that I will die one day and eventually they will need to do it on their own. Constantly remind the mind to let go." Yes, this is perfect, Mayuli. Your children choosing not to listen to you, you don't actually have to put any plan in place to get that to occur. That's going to automatically be occurring because this is the way that they're functioning in the world, based on their own cravings, based on their own anger, based on their own ignorance or unknowing of true reality. As you become more and more wise and you function in your relationships differently, you'll notice that your children will listen to you more readily. But even still, they're going to occasionally think, of course, if they still have craving, anger, and ignorance and their ego in there, they're going to think like they're wiser than mom, or they don't have to listen to mom, or even just impermanence. Maybe as they age, you share something with them and they're like, oh, that's a great idea, but they're going to do something completely opposite of what you're sharing. This is impermanence. So you're going to experience this in your relationship over and over and over again. And what you're choosing to share here as a way to transform the mind, this is what you would like to do. So you're understanding that very accurately. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments in any of our platforms. So what I'll do then is just thank all of you guys for joining for today's class, and at the same time invite you guys to attend our future classes, because each Sunday and Wednesday we have this group learning program where I'm sharing the teachings of the Buddha from this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Each Sunday I'm sharing a chapter that's in this book, and today we're on chapter 13, but next week on Sunday we're going to be in chapter 14, which is the 4 healthy mental states. These are referred to as the Brahma Viharas. It's helping you to learn how to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are antidoting specific challenges that the unenlightened mind has. This is where the Buddha oftentimes gets the reputation of almost being like a doctor, that he's describing certain symptoms that are in the mind, and then he's applying a certain prescription or an antidote. And you can learn how to be your own doctor, that you can identify those symptoms that are in your mind that you're experiencing, and then bring in the antidote or the prescription, which are in some cases these 4 healthy mental states. So So I'm going to be explaining to you what these 4 healthy mental states are. I'm going to explain to you the symptoms that you're going to see if you're not practicing these. And then I'm going to teach you how to cultivate these in the mind so that you can fully develop the mind with loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And this is going to antidote some of the symptoms and challenges that you're seeing in the mind. So we'll be exploring that next week. And remember, you can always read these chapters before and or after class. You can download the book from our website, buddhadailywisdom.com. You can take it and go print it if you like, or you can order printed copies on Amazon, or if you're here in Chiang Mai, you can pick them up at our temple. So next Sunday, we're going to be in chapter 14. And then this Wednesday, I'm going to be guiding you in loving kindness meditation, where we do a guided loving kindness meditation together, and then I open up to any and all questions that you might have related to the path to enlightenment. So it's just a free-form question day for you guys to ask anything you like. So thank you all for asking questions. Thank you for participating in today's class. As people choose to learn and practice these teachings, I have a lot of admiration for students because it takes a certain amount of work to go inward and work on the mind and develop your life practice and work towards becoming a better and better human being. As you do so, you're going to notice more peacefulness and calmness and kindness and respect that your mind is cultivating, more gratitude that you have for other people. And then this is all going to be coming back to you more and more as you cultivate the mind. So I have a lot of admiration for people who choose to develop a practice of harmlessness where you're disinterested in causing harm to others. And I realize that sometimes it's not easy, but it's also not tough either. You need guidance, you need resources, you need help. And that's why these classes, courses, and retreats that I share and all these resources are here to be able to help you. And as you need help, feel free to reach out. You can schedule appointments with me. You can ask questions in class. You can post questions on Facebook, and you can even send private messages. I'm here to help you as you look to develop any aspect of the path to enlightenment, including identifying your cravings and analyzing the mind to look inward and be able to put together a plan for yourself to target and almost surgically remove some of these cravings, desires, attachments. So thank you all for your participation and your questions. I appreciate your dedication to learning the teachings of the Buddha. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.